Seemed like a good idea at the time. So I have a question to start off today. Actually, before I do, how good is it to have the youth camp band? I've got to say, I thought I was trying to work out the average age of the youth camp band. I thought the youngest one there must have been that handsome young fellow on keyboard. I think he must have been, one of the really young ones. But how good? I think we should have them more often. That's fantastic. But I have a question for you, and that question is: have you met any famous person who is the most, not just met, okay, a little bit more than just met, but who is the most famous person that you've hung out with? Anyone in the room got a famous person that you've hung out with? Johnny Depp. Someone's got to hang. Well, okay. Draw the line in the sand. That's it. We're done. Anyone else? Any other famous people? I actually did ask Shaz to post this online, and she's sent it to me in a text, and I've just realised I forgot to get my phone out. Just excuse me for a minute. There we go. Okay. All right. Yeah. I would say I didn't think that through very well, but I did think it through. I just forgot to get it out. Anyway. Okay. So, online what they're telling us is Joan Birch, get this, once babysat the children of Adam West, the original Batman. The original Batman. So Joan Birch babysat the Bat children. Shaz got to meet and hang out with the entire Split Enz band. Most of this side of the room are going, who? Shaz's mum met Billy Connolly when The Samurai was being filmed in New Zealand. Alex Scott spent time with Tom Hanks at a graduation ceremony at Yale. Very flash. And Eric spent time with the Queen when he was part of the Salvation Army Regent Hall Band. Well done, Eric. That's awesome. Now, to take that question a step further, has anyone ever hung... Oh, sorry, I forgot to share my little famous story. I nearly forgot. So, probably the most famous people I've got to hang out with, and I think everyone's going to be in awe. Some years ago, Laura and I had the privilege of going on a cruise before they became SS Pandemic. And on that cruise, we had breakfast one morning with this lovely couple, and no, I wasn't dressed like this for breakfast on the cruise. Had breakfast with this lovely couple. You're going to be in awe when I tell you who they were. Get this, the parents of Jason Bright. I know. Your silence tells me that you're in awe. And yes, I realise that probably the only person who might have even got a little bit excited has gone out to kids' church and didn't even get to hear that. But anyway, I'll tell him about it later on, Mr. Gibson. But Jason Bright's a V8 supercar racing car driver, and had a lovely chat with his parents on SS Pandemic, and had a lovely time. But we did all actually happen to stay awake during that conversation, as I suspect most of the people in those conversations we've just talked about managed to stay awake. But has anyone hung out with a quite famous person and they've kind of dozed off while you're hanging out with them? No? I was very, very tempted to get a whole bunch of pictures of politicians asleep in the background of newsreels. It's hilarious, very, very funny. Worth looking up on Google, politicians asleep. Very funny. But whatever your religious views are, I think a quick snapshot through history allows us to assume that this guy named Jesus was someone of significant note throughout history. And someone's just sent me a text saying they knew who Jason Bright's parents were. So that's good, thank you. Man, I distracted myself then. Where was I? Religious views, Jesus, history, pretty famous person, right? So getting to hang out to Jesus, I reckon, would be right up there in terms of famous people throughout history. And the story that Karen just read to us tells us about these guys who got to hang out with him quite a bit. They spent 3 years hanging out with him. And in this one instance, he didn't just doze off. He didn't just doze off. He was asleep on a cushion in the back of a boat in the middle of a storm. Oh, yeah, shout out to the White House family in Philadelphia if you're watching. Just thanks for the pillow. But this is probably not the cushion it's not the cushion that Jesus fell asleep on. To be honest, it was probably more of a sandbag, I think, that Jesus would have had his head on. But in the translation we read, it describes it as a cushion. And so Jesus didn't just doze off in hanging out with these guys. In the middle of a storm, he falls fast asleep on a cushion. And I'm going to take this off because I made it yesterday and it's way too small for my head and it'll give me a headache if I leave it on. Now, where am I going with this? Well, stick with me and we'll find out. But before I do, we're going through a series at the moment, as you may have picked up, called Simply Jesus, as the sign on the cross there behind me says. And the last 2 weeks we've been looking at Jesus and his humanity, and kind of the subtext to that was how Jesus shows us how to live. And today we're looking at the divinity of Jesus. The divinity of Jesus is really about how he had the God factor, if you will. How Jesus shows us who God is. And so, as we look at this story and as we look a little bit beyond this story today, what will we see that Jesus shows us who God is? Well, let's unpack that together a little bit in Simply Jesus. So that story, you probably don't need me to review it. Karen's just read it to us, but they had a very big, very busy day. They were hanging out with lots of people. You know how draining, pardon me, that can be at times, even for us extroverts. And teaching, healing, doing all sorts of things, being really well engaged with people. Very big, busy day. And they jump in a boat. Jesus says, "Look, let's chug across to the other side of the lake, and we'll just have a bit of time out on the trip across the other side, and we'll head across the other side, and we'll do some more business over there and see how things go." On the way across, big storm blows up. Jesus falls asleep in the back of the boat. Big storm blows up. The disciples these guys, a bunch of these guys, not all of them, but a bunch of these guys are seasoned fishermen. They've been on this lake pretty much all their lives. No doubt they've been through plenty of storms, plenty of squalls before. And this storm, so they just go into autopilot. They start doing the things that they've always done to try and survive the storm. There's some guys there who haven't experienced that and perhaps didn't know what to do. But I read this story recently, and the picture that came to my mind is that these guys did everything they possibly could by themselves before they even thought twice about waking up Jesus. Jesus is fast asleep on his cushion in the back of the boat, and they're running around, scrambling, doing everything they can to try and survive this storm. And what gives me that impression is in the story, it says that the boat was just about to sink and they woke Jesus up and said, "Don't you care that we're about to drown?" So they left it until the very last minute to approach Jesus. And as I saw this picture in my mind, I thought, why did they wait so long? What was it that caused them to think that they couldn't wake Jesus earlier? Were they afraid to wake him? Were they thinking that maybe, he gets cranky without his sleep and he might kind of scold them if they wake him up in the middle of a storm that might kill them? Did they think that they had to protect his need for sleep in some way? That he's this precious, fragile little thing that needs his sleep and we need to protect that even in the midst of a storm that's going to kill us? Did they think that he wouldn't be interested in helping them survive a storm? I mean, that's just not the sort of thing that he deals with. Did they think for some reason that it was their responsibility? Well, we're the fishermen. I guess we got ourselves into this. We've probably got to get ourselves out of it. Did they think that Jesus had nothing to offer in that situation? I mean, after all, he's a carpenter. He's not an experienced nautical fisherman like some of these guys are. Did they think that he had nothing to bring to the table? Did they think that he was just too holy? That he was too divine, too godlike, too precious to disturb for something so trivial as a storm? I'm not sure the answer to that question, and we're going to revisit those questions in a couple of minutes, but I find myself scratching my head when I ask those questions because we have the gift of these writings that have been provided for us, and we know the things that Jesus did before this. We know the interactions that he had with these guys before this. We know the power that he showed and that he demonstrated. And so we're just going to do a quick dot point review, and this is the goal. 3 and a bit chapters in 3 minutes, right? So this is in Mark chapter 4. You can also read this story in the books of Luke and Matthew in the Bible, but we're going to have a look at Mark. So what we're going to do is just do a quick 3-minute review of the things that happened prior to this event that should have given these guys a bit of a clue about who Jesus was and his interest in helping them survive the storm. Okay, so has someone somewhere nearby the front here got a timer they can put on? We're going to see whether I can get through this in 3 minutes, which would be a miracle in itself. All right, so here we go. In 3 minutes, 3 and a bit chapters of Mark, here's what happens. Jesus calls these average, boring, stinky, uneducated fishermen. He invites them to come with him. These very same guys that are in the storm. He just says, follow me. They drop everything and follow him. There's something about this man that they just can't help but drop everything and follow him. Whoever's got the timer on, tell me when we get to 3 minutes. They see him teach with this strange new authority that he just teaches boldly and bravely and says things that challenge everybody and help people learn and understand and think. And it's something they haven't experienced before. It's this new authority in his teaching. He casts out a demon or an evil spirit, some kind of presence of the very existence of evil in the world, and he kind of says to this evil inside a person, get out, and it gets out. He heals one of the guy's mother-in-law. Height of the White Houses in Penrith. Did someone say time? Oh, time out, yeah, time out. He heals a mother-in-law. He just walks in and heals her, makes her well. He healed many people, it says, who were sick with various diseases and demons. So he's not just stopping at one, many people. Instantly, he healed a guy with leprosy. This was a skin condition in those times, which was just horrendous. It was just one of the worst things that could be imagined for the people in the time. Jesus goes, boom, and it's healed. He healed a paralysed guy who gets dropped through the roof. His friends dig a hole in the roof, drop him down in the middle of Jesus while he's teaching. And not only did Jesus heal him, but he actually said to this guy, your sins are forgiven. And Jesus didn't die on the spot, which is kind of what people thought might happen if you tried to claim that someone's sins were forgiven. He invited a much maligned traitor, turncoat, tax collector, someone that no one else wanted to be around. Jesus invited him to be part of his posse. I've lost my spot. He hung out with villains, outcasts and rejects. He made this crazy statement about, I'm hanging out with the people who are sick. He said, it's not the healthy who need the doctor, it's the sick, right? So he hung out with the people, the villains, the outcasts, the rejects. He defended his own followers when they were challenged by law, or more to the point, when religion tried to crop up its ugly head and say, you must, you have to, you should. Jesus defended his followers and his friends in that space, and he stood up to religious and social leaders and influencers, the most important people in the community at the time. Jesus stood up to them and said, oh yeah, you want some of this? And they backed down. 30 seconds. He healed a guy who had a deformed hand on the Sabbath, right? This special religious day of rest when no one's supposed to do anything. Jesus healed this guy and made a declaration about how important mercy was. And in fact, mercy is more important than religion. And in that context and in that world, we could unpack that for a day, but we're not going to because I've only got about 13 seconds left. He healed many people. Is that time? 10. He healed many people and cast out evil spirits by being crowded by people who all wanted a piece of him. Lots and lots of people wanted a piece of him. He still did kindness and acts of good towards. There's 3 minutes. I didn't quite get there. Let's go 3 and a bit minutes because it was 3 and a bit chapters. He invited these same guys who were in the boat into a very personal partnership. He invited them into his life's mission. He said, we're in this together. He expressed his love and affection towards those who were with him, even challenging the idea of mothers and brothers. His mothers and brothers came to see him, and he said, who are my mothers and brothers? These guys are as important, if not more important to me than my own biological mothers and brothers. He taught average people in ways and through stories that made sense to them and helped them understand. He took the time to help these guys, his closest followers, who he just declared this brotherly, parently affection for. He took the time to help them understand what he was teaching. This is a very personal, very close, very intimate picture of what Jesus was doing here. Okay, I didn't quite make it. That's 3 and a bit chapters in 3 and a bit minutes. These are the experiences that Mark tells us these guys have already had with Jesus. Now, why, if they've experienced that, would they hesitate for a second to wait Jesus in that storm? Let's just pop up a slide with some of those excuses that we thought might be. They're afraid of him, afraid to wake him. Is there anything in that that gives us any indication that they should have been afraid of that? They need to protect him, his need to sleep. This guy stood up to people in so many different ways. Maybe he's not interested in helping us. These same guys who he said, who are my brothers and who are my mother and my brothers and my sisters? These are my mother. Is he not interested in helping them survive that storm? Not to mention that actually he was in the storm too. It's our responsibility. We got ourselves into this mess. We have to get ourselves out of it. Jesus is constantly going to people who got themselves into messes and responding in kindness and favour. They've experienced a snapshot of that. Maybe he's got nothing to offer. Has he got nothing to offer here? He heals people. He casts out demons. He stands up with courage. He teaches with authority. Has he got nothing to offer here? Is he too precious, too holy to disturb? This Jesus who walked among us, who showed mercy, who showed kindness, who reached out when others pulled back, who acted when others condemned, who showed mercy over religion. Is he too precious, too holy to disturb? He walks with us. He takes the time to sit with us and teach us. Is he too precious? Is he too holy to disturb? It's not the picture that we get from 3 and a bit chapters of experiences. And as I unpacked all this in my crazy busy mind, I thought that, whatever the reason that they didn't wake him, I kind of wonder if in that moment when Jesus said, "Why do you have such little faith?" I thought if I translated that in the context of all those other things, I wonder if what Jesus was saying was, guys, as soon as you knew this was out of control, you could have got me. You could have called me. As soon as you knew this was out of hand, don't you know that I love you? Don't you know that I'm for you? Don't you know, more than that, don't you know that I'm right here in the middle of this life with you? I'm not distant, I'm not removed. I want to get through this with you. Don't you know my character yet, guys? I'm not here to be distant or unapproachable or untouchable. Have you not seen my power and what I can do? Do you not think I might bring something to the table here? And I wondered if Jesus' question to the disciples was not, I'm convinced it wasn't a condemnation. Oh, you blokes have got no faith at all. But I believe it was a plea. And I wonder if Jesus questioned the disciples because he'd already displayed to them that he was so ridiculously separate and yet so ridiculously other. They'd never met anyone like this before. He showed power like no one had. He showed that he had the authority and the power of God. He's so ridiculously separate to them and yet so ridiculously present and accessible and available. You see, Jesus' divinity, his God factor, is not just a revelation of his holiness and his power, his righteousness, his godness, his otherness. It's not just a revelation of that. It's also a revelation of his presentness, his inness, his in with usness, if you like. So ridiculously separate and yet at the same time so ridiculously present and accessible and available. That's the God we follow, and that's the God that Jesus revealed in the way he walked and talked and went about his business. I'm going to invite the music team up while we just take a couple of minutes to reflect on this. And I want to ask you today, in our storms, and maybe not even our storms, maybe even just in our everyday, ordinary lives, in our moments of life, I wonder, who do we see ourselves being most like in that story? Maybe it's in a recent crisis or a recent experience, or maybe it's something else. But are we like the disciples in the beginning of that story? Let's not get Jesus involved, maybe just not yet. Or maybe we're even questioning, God, do you even care? Do you have anything to bring to the table here, and do you even care? And maybe we're in that space. Whether it's in crisis or just as we go through life, maybe we're just not sure if God, if you even care or if you bring anything to the table. Maybe we're the disciples in the middle of a story. Jesus, help! It's all turned to custard. We've got nothing left. Help. Maybe we're the disciples at the end of the story, which I didn't talk about, but Karen read to us, who've just gone, whoa. What is the power of this man? And the power of this man for me to stop this storm that we wouldn't drown. Whoa, what is the power of this man? I wonder how many of us have such incredible connection with who we are and whose we are, have such incredible belief in the God that we follow that, like Jesus, we can have some cushion time. And in the midst of the storms of life, whatever they throw at us, that we can have some element of contentment, peace, and well-being because of a calmness and confidence of who He is and whose He is, in that He's there for me. Who do we want to be in this story? Who are we in the story, and who do we want to be in this story? I wonder what's stopping you from reaching out to God. It may seem like Jesus is asleep on the pillow at the back of your boat and you're just scrambling away trying to do your own thing. Maybe you haven't tried to wake Him because you've forgotten that He's there. I know I'm guilty of that probably nearly every day. I just want to remind you today that He's there. What's stopping you from reaching out to God? Do you think He has something to bring to the table? For some of us today, I have no doubt that we're in the middle of or have experienced and are experiencing storms that just buffet us and throw us around, and it feels like we're going to sink, and it just feels like Jesus is asleep on the back of the boat. And He just seems to keep sleeping. I encourage you to continue reaching out. He has something to bring to the table and He's interested in being in that storm. He is in that storm with you. Whether it seems like He's asleep in the back of the boat or not, He's in that storm with you. And He has a calm confidence and a peace to bring to you. Whatever's going on for you, wherever you're at, Jesus reveals God to us. He shows us that He's so ridiculously different to us and yet so ridiculously present and available and accessible. You don't have to be worried about waking Him. He wants to be alongside you in it. He does have something to offer. And I'm pretty confident He doesn't wear Mr. Tickle pajamas. Just going to take some time just to reflect and respond this morning. And if you need something, if you need to call out to Jesus in the midst of your storm or just in your everyday today, we want to just create an opportunity and space to do that. We won't drag this out unnecessarily, but we're just going to have a time of prayer. And similar to last week, if you just want to call out to Jesus on your own and you just feel like that's a personal journey you need to do, I want to invite you just, if it would be helpful to you, to just come and kneel out the front here, just as a way of just recognising for yourself and maybe declaring to others, I've got some business to do with God. Mate, you can do that in your seat just as easily, absolutely. Sometimes it helps to just affirm within our own mind that we're actually taking some time out to do something a bit different. And so it may be helpful to kneel and pray. Maybe you need someone in the storm with you. Maybe you need to know that you're not alone. And so as we did last week, we will have some of our prayer team available standing out the front here. And unfortunately, the world we find ourselves in, they will need to wear a face mask. And it's a bit confronting and yucky, but it is what it is. And it allows us to provide the opportunity to have someone stand with you in that storm if that's what you need. And so someone would love to pray with you in that space if you need to. Whether you're in the room or for our congregation watching online, if you need to reach out, there's always our NBC Live number to text a message through to and have someone call you back and pray with you, or just to be aware of your needs. The number's on the bottom of the screen or it's up on the PowerPoint for those in the room. Whether you're in the room or not, you can text a prayer request to that number. And there's just one other challenge I'd like to give to you today. And I was going to suggest we do it here, but for a number of reasons we can't. But Lisa's beautifully placed some pillows at the bottom of the cross here. The cross is a symbol of Jesus. And sometimes I think in the midst of all that comes at us in life, we just need some pillow time. And sometimes it's an act of faith. In the midst of the storm, whatever's going on for us to go, God, I actually trust you so much. I mean, Jesus was so confident that you were on his side that he was able to sleep through the middle of a storm. I've got lots going on right now. The last thing I want to do is pillow time. But God, I'm just going to symbolically take 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'm going to lay my head physically on a cushion or a pillow to say, God, I trust you. I'm not going to do anything about this right now. I'm not going to scramble around and try and fix everything because I know I can't anyway. And in spite of the anxiety, in spite of the pressure, in spite of the stress, I'm going to physically lay myself down and put my head on a pillow and say, I trust you. I trust that you care. I trust that you have something to bring to the table. I trust that you are with me in this. So there's some people at home that can do that right now. Here in the room, maybe we need to go home and find a pillow when we get home and take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour and do some pillow time just as a way of saying, God, I trust you. Like Jesus trusted you. Like Jesus was there with the disciples. I want some of that peace that he showed. Kneel for prayer, stand for prayer, text for prayer, pillow time, whatever you need to do. This is one opportunity for you to take some time to do that. And know that as much as God is ridiculously other, he is ridiculously present for you and with you, whatever life throws.